Welcome to the Local Legends podcast, where we share stories of untold community spirit. I'm your host, Charlotte Bosler, and joining us today is Oscar Mussons as we discuss his journey from volunteer to award-winning volunteer manager and beyond. Ever considered a career in volunteering? This is your chance to learn all about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Oscar. Why don't you start off introducing yourself briefly and what were your early experiences with volunteering?
My name is Oscar Mussons. I'm originally from Spain, as you can tell by my accent. I've been in Australia for 6 years now and 13 years outside of Spain. And since I moved to Australia, I've been working in the volunteering space. I'm now a program director at the Australian Business Volunteers. And before that, I was a volunteer manager at the Asylum Seeker Centre in Newtown in Sydney. And I'm also board director at the Centre for Volunteering New South Wales.
Fantastic, thank you. And tell us about the Asylum Seeker Centre. What do they do and how did you become a volunteer manager with them?
Yeah, look, I actually studied as a volunteer at the Asylum Seeker Centre when I first came to Australia. So when I first joined the organization as a volunteer, I was just driven by the desire to contribute to the cause. I think that cause was very close to my heart, and supporting people seeking asylum and refugees is something that throughout my career studying law and international relations, I was really interested in. Unexpectedly, the opportunity to become a volunteer manager came about, and I recall like my previous experience in managing volunteers here and there, but if this was a team of hundreds of volunteers, I said, why not? Let's give it a try. I decided to embrace that challenge, and the decision turned out to be like a very defining moment, I would say, in Australia, in my career in Australia, because and in my journey as a person, because I stepped into a role where I found that my past experience equipped me to like become a volunteer manager. Perhaps back when I started being a volunteer manager, it wasn't a thing. Volunteer managers wasn't a thing that when you back when I finished my career, wasn't a thing that you can become a volunteer manager or you can become a lawyer or you can do this and that. A volunteer manager wasn't a role that actually ever came up. But yeah, look, my previous experiences helped me to get there. Yeah, it was a motivation to support a team of passionate volunteers, and just being a volunteer manager gave me a sense of fulfillment and growth, and both on a personal and a professional level. And what started as a let's give it a try evolved into like a 5-year role at the Asylum Seeker Centre. So yeah, the Asylum Seeker Centre is a place of welcome in Sydney that supports people seeking asylum that come from 98 different countries, and people who have fled situations of great danger. So the support we provide, or the support that Asylum Seeker Centre provides, because I'm no longer working there, but sometimes I still talk to them on present tense, is mostly due because of the great support that volunteers that come into the centre are able to provide to people seeking asylum.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you for sharing that. And I think it sounds like it was a really great experience for you, and that definitely I think people don't necessarily think of a volunteer manager as a career, but it absolutely is a viable one. Can you tell us, walk us through from your experience what a typical day in the life of a volunteer manager is? What are some of the roles and responsibilities?
The typical day is that there is not a typical day. Like every day looks different. That's from my point of view. I feel like you never know what you're going to expect. But I say that in a positive way. Obviously, you've got your challenges, but every day you learn new things. You get to meet new people, and it's a mix of coordinating people, communicating things in the right way, and a lot of leadership. You have to have good leadership skills because you are pretty much not only supporting the volunteers, but also supporting the people or understanding the people that the volunteers are supporting. So you need to have a really good understanding of how the organization runs as a whole. And yeah, making sure that typical day, well, ensuring that the volunteers have the assigned tasks on the day, that we have enough volunteers to run whatever tasks and projects we are expected to run on the day, communicating that properly to the volunteers, training them. Training was a big component of being a volunteer manager, preparing or giving them the resources so that they feel prepared for their roles, especially in that sector at the Asylum Seeker Center. A lot of training focused on working with people that had experienced trauma, being prepared for difficult conversations, cross-cultural competency, understanding the visa system in Australia, even though they didn't have to talk about their legal stuff, but it was good to understand the different visas that people were on so that they could understand their struggle. Yeah, a lot of meetings, a lot of inductions happening, just being there to support the volunteers. I think for me that was key, knowing that the volunteers could always come to me and ask for questions and being present and being open and making people feel comfortable around you. Obviously, there are a lot of admin tasks that you have to do and a lot of checks and making sure that they got the right checks before they start. That's the boring part. But yeah, you need to make sure that this is in place before they start.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds, as you say, it doesn't sound like there was a typical day. It sounds like it was very varied and there's a lot that goes into being a volunteer manager. And I wonder what it was like going from a volunteer with the Asylum Seekers Centre to then becoming a volunteer manager. How did that help or inform how you then approached your volunteers and, as you say, make them feel comfortable? And
Yeah, look, it was important because I had a better understanding of how I wanted to be supported from the other side, and then making sure that that informed my first few months into the role and how I wanted to shape the program, and having a lot of discussions with the different managers and how we were, or how within my role I was able to support the work, the magnificent work they do. Because as you know, like at the end of the day, volunteers are there because they're supporting non-for-profits that are under-resourced, and they are needed because of that same reason. And but we also need to make sure that by bringing in volunteers, we are very appreciative of the, the time they give and the skills they bring. So yeah, both supporting both sides and just having that understanding, having been on the other side, was critical.
absolutely. And how big was the team that you were looking after? Something like 400, was it?
Yeah, that's right. So there were 400 or up to 500 in some years, within a calendar year. And then we will have, say, a regular team of 200 that will come to the center at least once a day. So yeah, it was pretty big.
Amazing. And uh, great to have so many volunteers, but also I'm sure very challenging to deal to manage so many people. What were some of the challenges that you experienced, and how were you able to maybe overcome them?
Yeah, look, I think just making sure that the volunteers were properly trained and there was some training and development in place, because that was the refugee sector is constantly shaping. The unfortunately the events that are happening around the world help us with the recruitment because people see what's happening around the world and they want to support, and they start by doing so within their community. They don't have to go all the way to a refugee camp to do so. They know that there are people seeking asylum and refugees in the community that they can support. So being able to provide the training and support, and considering that there are so many different roles within the organization, there are volunteers that come and cook lunch. There are volunteers that come and support people with finding employment. There are volunteers that are answering the phone at reception. There are volunteers who are just helping people to understand how to top up their Opal card or to connect them to other organizations. So the roles were so diverse that you wanted to make sure that each of them had the appropriate training that was effective, that the volunteers felt safe by doing so, like if they're handling stuff in the kitchen, you also needed to have resources for them to be able to do it in a safe way. And yeah, making sure that they to mitigating the risk of them being exposed to conversations or with people that had experienced trauma. Another challenging thing sometimes is just retention, because you had volunteers who were starting their career and they were very good, very committed, but then the moment they find a job, they start working full time and you can no longer retain them. And there are people that are retired that might have more time, but then because they have more time, they go on holidays to Europe for 6 months and stuff like that. So just finding a balance, making sure that you've got a team of volunteers that whenever one of them is on holidays or unfortunately needs to leave the organization, you quickly respond to that gap and by bringing in another volunteer.
Great. So it sounds like training and understanding your volunteers, where they're at in their life, why they're volunteering, and finding that balance has really helped, which is great. And to someone who has volunteered and then been a volunteer manager and might have been involved with that, onboarding and, encouraging people to volunteer, what would you say to someone looking to volunteer?
Yeah, volunteer for me when I started volunteering. Sorry, when I was in my teenage year and when I started university, embarking on a volunteering journey, it was a powerful way for me to connect to some of my passions. So for me, my passion was to get to know other countries, get to know their cultures, visiting other countries, and volunteering was a I pretty much make volunteering part of like my traveling. So I was able to connect both of those passions. And yeah, just I will tell them to follow their heart, to choose something that they're passionate about, that deeply connects to what they've done in their career. For example, in the organization that I work at now, at the Australian Business Volunteers, we have a lot of mentors that have a lot of experience in business, and they're able to come and support people with business skills. So that's something like connecting your skills to like something that you're passionate about. And yeah, if you do so, you'll find volunteering to be incredibly rewarding and transformative experience. Yeah.
Absolutely, and definitely having that passion is important. And is that those passions, is that how your volunteering with First Nations communities came about? You were passionate about soccer and
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that when I first moved to Australia, I understood how important, if I wanted to stay in this country, was to understand how it is to work with First Nations people, understand their culture, understand their values. And in my first few months in Australia, I decided that I wanted to volunteer in that space. And I did find that they had uh, football, I call it football, they call it soccer here, a football tournament in New South Wales that it was organized every year, and I reached out to them, and I've been volunteering with them ever since I moved to Australia, and that was a way for me to like still be connected to one of my passions, which is football, and also getting to know the oldest living culture in the world and the First Nations of the country I live in, the traditional owners of the land I live in. So for me, that was a very deep connection that I made. I still continue to support them, and it was the best way to understand the challenges that First Nations people still face in Australia, but also like supporting them in a way that, in a very emotional and good way, is by practicing sports and by bringing young people together and doing something that they're passionate about.
fantastic. And definitely being able to build those relationships is so rewarding and, beneficial to everyone involved. Has that experience volunteering with First Nations communities, did that influence your own experience as a volunteer manager?
Yes, because for instance, as part of what I did, as part of my role at the Asylum Seeker Center, I was able to then inform more about how important it was the reconciliation pathway for bringing different perspective to the organization. And together with some colleagues, for instance, we were able to start the reconciliation action plan at the Asylum Seeker Center, and I was one of the chairs that was able to lead that plan to fruition. So it was great to see that happening and how the organization came together and colleagues starting embarking into that journey of reconciliation. So yeah, I was able to connect because I saw that how important it was to connect First Nations with people seeking asylum. First Nations are actually very welcoming of people seeking asylum in Australia. This is their land, and they're the first ones that say yes, they're welcome in our land. And even then, they have so many things in common: the way they've experienced trauma, the way that they're facing challenges when they interact with governments. So they have some commonalities, and we were able to explore those by developing the reconciliation plan at the Asylum Seeker Center. And that was a really good experience and something that was very rewarding.
And what a fantastic initiative as well. We at the centre couldn't agree more that reconciliation is really important and a great initiative to be involved in. And to talk more about the initiatives that you were able to bring to the Asylum Seekers Centre, tell me about the New South Wales Humanitarian Hub. How did that happen?
Yeah, look, it was actually an idea that was already in place when I started as a volunteer manager at the Asylum Seeker Center. However, it was on development stage, and I was able to start actioning on some of the items that we thought about. So the idea was pretty much bringing in different organizations that work in the same space that support people seeking asylum and refugees, and making sure that because we have some common spaces, and some of those common spaces is volunteering. So if we are bringing in volunteers into organizations, let's make sure we've got the same resources that we can share. Let's make sure we have the same training opportunities for volunteers. Let's make sure we have a place where people can go to and decide where they want to invest their time or skills. So we created a website where we could advertise our roles. We had training available twice a month for volunteers to come and join us. So that training was focused on things that were important that we had identified. And we have a hub coordinator. So the hub coordinator was able to run those sessions for the volunteers. And there were prerequisites for volunteers before they started their role at any of the organizations to go through that training in order to better feel prepared for what it was to come, the support that they were going to be able to provide to people seeking asylum. So yeah, having very close relationships with the different volunteer managers of the four organizations that were part of that hub, and then having that coordinator that was a funded role to be able to deliver those trainings and to be able to coordinate the different initiatives that we had within the hub.
Yeah, great. And that sounds very helpful and also very collaborative. It's great what can happen when, like you said, the relationships with the different volunteer managers, what can happen when, two heads come together. It's great. And I'd love to know, it sounds like you have a very hands-on experience. You've been very involved and left, I'm sure, a really big impact in the communities and organizations you've been involved with. What are some of the people, either from Asylum Seeker Centre or First Nations, volunteering First Nations communities, what are some of the people, who were some of the people you remember helping during your experience?
That's one of the great things about being a volunteer manager is that you get to know a lot of people, a lot of, I would say, very interesting people, not just people. They're like people who just come from different walks of life, and yeah, they bring in so many different experiences and colors into like conversations. And yeah, look, I had the great pleasure of getting to know people who were, as I said before, like finishing their careers or already like retired, that were able to share a lot of that experience and dedication and insights. And yeah, they brought a lot of skills and experience into the work we do, and that was invaluable. And also volunteers that were starting their careers, students that were passionate about human rights and that wanted to dedicate or that were interested in social work and they wanted to start their career by volunteering, and they found the work they working on supporting people seeking asylum very fulfilling. So I think, yeah, having maintained those connections with some of the volunteers over the years, sometimes I bump into them on the street, and they're very exciting to, no matter what, no matter how many years have passed, having had that connection, it's very deep because of the setting, how that happened, and because of the people we support. And also, yeah, like having been able to mentor some of those students. I was their supervisor. They came to do their placement at the Asylum Seeker Center, and feeling like I had a say on, or I was able to support them somehow in exploring different opportunities and guiding them on the right path for their career. That was very fulfilling. But other than volunteers, as you said, like all the people that I met that came to Australia, and some of them are able to call Australia home now. Some of them been fighting to be able to stay in Australia for many years. Some of them had been in what they call detention centers, offshore detention centers, but they're actually prisons where people were kept for many years. And when they came to the center and seeing their evolution and seeing how they came with fear and seeing how there was so much uncertainty around them, not having a job, not having a house, not having money, and then seeing that evolution over the years and seeing that the Asylum Seeker Center was a place where they belonged, and that was a place where they could find people that were able to understand what they were going through. I think that's something that it was deeply moving to see that, and sometimes coming back to that and seeing people that unfortunately are still waiting for their visa to be granted refugee status in Australia, and seeing that they're still waiting for that. We don't know how long that will take, but at least they recognize the support that you've been giving them over the years, and the kindness that's been offered by many volunteers that have gone through the doors to just give their time and their skills. Yeah, it was heartening to see those individuals gain confidence thanks to the support that volunteers have been giving them over the years. And this is something that it needs to be an example of how we want Australia to look like. And yeah, a testament of the power of community and the profound impact of volunteers. Yeah.
Incredible. And it sounds like it would be incredibly rewarding to have that impact and to be able to have those one-on-one experiences and learn what they're going through and how you're helping. And I think it's fantastic in the way that I hear you talking about your experiences. I hear a lot of care and a lot of support. And I'm wondering, how were there resources and organizations that were able to support you as a volunteer or a volunteer manager?
I think it's also been a bit proactive. Like the humanitarian hub has been proactive, reaching out to a lot of different organizations, talking to other volunteer managers, attending to volunteer events that are happening, or events around volunteering that are happening in your city, in New South Wales, understanding that there are places where you can find resources online, and there are a lot of conference on learning skills on how to become a better volunteer manager. I think, yeah, those are the things that helped me the most, because as I said, yeah, I'd never been a volunteer manager before, but conversations with other people that had been in similar roles previously allowed me to gain that confidence and feeling like, yeah, look, all other volunteer managers were at this point given time, and having those resources in place, like at the Center for Volunteering, they have a really good website with great resources. Volunteer in Australia also have a hub with resources, and there are many other resources that can be found online. But I think, as we were saying before, volunteer management is becoming a thing, which wasn't back in the days. But yeah, now with internet and technology, luckily volunteer managers are able to access a great array of different things that can support them in the role.
Yeah, and it's great to know that there's that support out there, that if you want to learn more about volunteer management, And if you need resources, there are people you can talk to, organizations, and obviously very happy to hear that the centre has helped as well. Tell us a bit more about your journey with the Centre for Volunteering. How have we helped you, and how has that relationship evolved to what it is now?
So I first started engaging with the Center for Volunteering as a volunteer manager because I just wanted to learn more, and I Center for Volunteering was actually offering a lot of workshops and conferences and had resources on the website. And the Asylum Seeker Center was a member of the Center for Volunteering, so I was able to access all those resources, and I had discounted prices to like the workshop they were organizing, and that's how it all came about. I then got nominated by a colleague of mine for the Volunteer of the Year Awards as a Volunteer Manager of the Year Awards. And I was very humbled by that recognition. And the Center for Volunteering acknowledged my contributions by awarding me the Volunteer Manager of the Year Award. I think back then was excellence on volunteer management. I think the name has changed over the years. But yeah, that was recognition that deeply humbled and motivated me to continue to do work within the volunteers sector, volunteering space. And yeah, the award was they opened new avenues for me to collaborate with the Center for Volunteering and allowing me to participate in different events and initiatives. And as I became more involved with the Center for Volunteering, I saw the opportunity to further contribute by becoming a board member. So now I've been a board member at the Center for Volunteering for the last 2 years. I think one of my first questions when I met Helen, who is the chair of the Center for Volunteering, it was like, I think I'm too young to become a board member. And I was like, no, actually, we want to bring younger people to our board because they're also experienced. I've learned so much with all the different board members. Some of them have been board members for so many years, and it's amazing how, yeah, just to be able to be part of that family, supporting the center at this level and being with like-minded people and staff members that have always been very supportive of me as a volunteer manager and now as a board member. It's been very rewarding experience, and yeah, very significant learning opportunity and understanding and being able to support the center in that role, and being very involved in the volunteering sector, and it's been great opportunity.
Yeah, and I love your use of the word family there. I am glad that it feels that way, because I think people who work at the centre, volunteer with the centre, and you're involved in the centre, that's the level of support and a comfort, that we want people to feel with us, is that you can come to us for anything. So it's fantastic.
And I always feel like I'm seeing like an uncle or an auntie or someone, or yeah, like I feel like so connected to, and I've known staff members for so many years since I started my role as a volunteer manager 6 years ago, that yeah, they already feel part of like my family in Australia.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. And in terms of where you are now with the Australian Business Volunteers, tell us how that happened. How has volunteering, managing volunteers, brought you to this position now?
Yeah, look, I did want to continue to do work in the non-for-profit sector, and also being able to develop some other skills. So I was able to um, become a program. So there's a bit of background noise. A program director at the Australian Business Volunteers, overseeing the planning and implementation and management of different programs. The programs that I now oversee support First Nations and communities that have been affected by natural disasters in Australia, and we support them by strengthening the work they're currently doing by bringing in mentors, by bringing in skills through skill business professionals, and supporting their economic resilience. And yeah, we rely on volunteers to carry out these programs.
Great. And did you imagine when you first started volunteering in Australia that this is where you would be down the line?
Not really. I always thought that obviously volunteering was gonna be a big part of the work I do and my personal pathway and being able to devote my time to personal or causes that I'm personally very deeply connected to, but not so much into like working and volunteering in organizations that are mainly focused on supporting different communities by bringing in volunteers or being a director in the big body of volunteering in the States. So, no, I didn't see myself here, but I'm glad that somehow life brings you to like where you need to be, and this is why it happened.
Absolutely. And I think it's definitely a common experience when people kind of fall into being a volunteer manager going down this route. And for someone who's considering volunteer management or maybe hasn't considered it before, but would be very much aligned with it, what advice would you give to that kind of person?
Yeah, look, as we said, volunteer management, the concept of volunteer management perhaps is not recognized within the current system or establishment, but I think that things are getting better. Being a volunteer manager back in the days was often undervalued and overlooked, and but however, witnessing how relevant that role is within the organizations that are making things happen in Australia and witnessing the evolution in this field is remarkable. So yeah, I will tell volunteer managers or people who are looking into getting into this role that this offers a unique opportunity to work with a diverse range of different individuals, that you can bring your skills but you will gain so many more skills than the ones you already have, and gain experiences that will be life changing experiences, and yeah, it will keep you motivated to contribute to like making our city a better city and our country a better country and the world a better world.
Absolutely. And that's a great, I think, high note to round off on. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, which I think is proof of your extensive career, but also impact and all the impact that would have come with that. If anyone listening wants to hear more inspiring stories of people doing great work in the community like Oscar, they can follow us at the Voices of Volunteering podcast channel, now streaming on major platforms. Thank you so much, Oscar, for sharing your story with us today, and best of luck with all your volunteer management or wherever this takes you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, and it was a pleasure to talk to you today, Charlie.
You've been listening to Voices of Volunteering, presented by the Centre for Volunteering. For resources, tools, training and news, head over to our website volunteering.com.au.